Will the FX5 overheat? That is the question I'm going to be answering today in a hands-on overheating test. Let's be honest, this is really Sony's fault for releasing a camera in the summer and sending it to me in Texas. The only saving grace for Sony is that we've had a pretty mild summer so far, including a lot of rain and flooding, which has kept things cooler, but it's still going to be a challenge for the FX5. So let's talk about how this test is set up. I put the FX5 outdoors on a tripod in the direct sunlight with what I would say is mostly sunny conditions. There were some clouds rolling over, but the majority of the time of this test, the camera was in direct sunlight, absorbing all that solar radiation, which only makes it hotter. Outdoor temperatures were between 88 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit when running this test. As always in these tests, I set the overheat protection setting on the camera to high, which would enable it to get as hot as possible before overheating. And because the FX5 also has a fan, I set the fan control to auto, which means the camera will choose how high it needs to run the fan to keep itself from overheating. Then, for video quality, remembering that the FX5 is the first cinema camera Sony has made other than the Burano and the Venice capable of filming not only in internal RAW, but also in open gate, two features which are really going to push and test the cooling capabilities of the camera. So of course I had to test them. I set up the FX5 to record in the absolute highest quality possible. This is 3:2 open gate in 5K resolution at 60 frames per second in the X-OCN LT raw video format, which is just a ton of data. It's almost a 2 gigabit per second bitrate. For context, I have a 480 gigabyte CFexpress Type A card that I put in this camera, and it only let me record for 34 minutes before it filled up, and I had to format it. If anything can make this camera overheat, it is these settings, which, let's be honest, is definitely overkill. It's not like you'd be setting up to film an outdoor wedding ceremony at this frame rate and resolution for hours at a time, but I think it's important to test this high level of video, because if the camera can keep from overheating with these settings, it's definitely capable of preventing overheating at anything else you throw at it, which is really reassuring. Also, I want you to know that I only have one battery when testing this camera, and it was only charged about 80% for this test, but I don't think that is a huge issue. Now, to start the test, I hit record and the camera started rolling, chewing through the memory card. After only 10 minutes of recording, the body of the camera reported it was up to 115 degrees, but it kept right on recording. What's crazy is that I couldn't even hear the fan. It was virtually silent, and I couldn't tell if it was running even in this heat unless I put my ear right up next to the camera. 7 minutes later, the sun went behind a cloud for a few minutes and the temperature dropped down to 107 degrees on the body, and this was impressive because even with the cloud, I would not have expected the temperature to drop this much, and it tells us that the fan was doing its job. Soon after that, though, the temperature rose again once the sun came back out to 118 degrees, but the camera kept right on rolling. A few minutes short of the 34-minute recording time, the camera started to report that the media was nearly full and showed this yellow triangle with an exclamation point. This is really cool. I've not seen something like this on earlier Sony cameras. For context, when the Panasonic S1R2, S1II, and S1IIe released, all those cameras had overheating issues that would have caused them to shut down right around this time of recording. But Panasonic did fix that somewhat in a firmware update, which makes all three of those cameras perform better. But then you have the FX5, which is just cruising right along here with zero issues, and that is fantastic news. Once the card fully filled up, all 480 gigabytes, it said media full, and then I went into the menu and quick formatted the card and pressed record again to get right back to testing the overheating. Let me just say too, the whole time this test was going on, I was sitting outside in the shade, but it was still really hot outside. I was sweating for this test, sacrificing my body for you. So you're welcome. 3 minutes into the second round of recording, and the camera surface temperature rose again to 119 degrees, but it kept right on going with no sign of failure. 5 minutes later, the temperature rose again to 123 degrees, but the camera kept right on chugging, zero issues, which is really impressive. One camera that I think of when comparing to this one would be the Nikon ZR, because that camera is also a compact cinema camera with a large screen capable of recording raw video internally. But the ZR can record 6K versus 5K on the FX5, but the FX5 can record open gate, which the ZR can't do. Most importantly, the ZR doesn't have a fan like the FX5, but when I tested the ZR, it still took almost an hour to overheat in 6K at 60 FPS. Good work, Nikon. Back to the FX5. 45 minutes into the recording, and this camera hasn't even broken a sweat. It's having zero issues keeping up with the high outdoor temperature and the crazy data rate, and I'm really impressed by this camera so far in regards to overheating. 7 minutes later, the temperature continued to climb all the way up to 135 degrees on the body, but it showed no signs of stopping, no overheat warnings, no memory card issues. I'm starting to think this camera may make it all the way until the battery drains with 23% remaining. Now, before we finish this test and get to the results, let me tell you about the sponsor of this video who are going to be really helpful to you when you're editing wedding videos that you filmed either with the FX5 or any camera for that matter. I've been using Bride&Groom video to edit my wedding films and YouTube videos, and I love them because they can edit your videos incredibly quickly for a very affordable price. Seriously, edits start at just $165 for a ceremony edit or $495 for a highlight. And Bride&Groom have a guaranteed 2-week turnaround time. You can get your edits back in just 14 days. Or if you opt for a rush edit, you can have it back in 7 days. And just because they're fast doesn't mean they skimp on quality. When it comes to editing, Bride&Groom truly care about matching your unique video editing style. They will take the time to get to know how you edit, and they're very upfront that if you need changes, they're happy to keep making revisions until you are 100% happy. Plus, Bride&Groom's website has a super simple and convenient online interface that they are constantly updating. You can log in at any time and submit new films for editing or check on the status of existing films. Look, we are over halfway through the year at this point, and in my experience, we as filmmakers and editors always get busy in the lead up to Christmas. The backlog starts to fill up, so now is the time to reach out to Bride&Groom. You can sign up and tell them your schedule of wedding films coming in the next 6 months, and they'll be ready to edit them as fast as you can film them. So reach out to Bride&Groom today to get onboarded and lock in the best editors for your unique editing style. Once the camera had almost filled up the card for a second time, the fan was finally ramped up to a higher speed where I could hear it from about a foot away. This fan continued for the rest of the test, but I'm happy to tell you the camera did fill up the card completely again for a second time. We're almost to a terabyte of recording here now, and only had a few percentage points of battery life remaining, but I kept it going by pressing the record button again until the very end. And finally, after 1 hour and 12 minutes, the camera battery finally died, and it showed no signs of overheating. No warnings, no video corruption or anything like that, just an absolute beast of a camera powering through even ridiculously hot weather. Remember, the battery was only at about 80% whenever I started this test, and more importantly, I want you to remember that the battery life of any camera is going to depend on how much the fan is running. And in a test like this, the fan's going to be running a lot, especially if the camera's been out for an extended period of time in the sun. So you will definitely want to buy a few batteries for your FX5. I'll link to recommendations down in the description. Regardless, I think between the new, more efficient Bionz XR2 processor in this camera and the great fan and cooling system, you do not need to worry about overheating with the FX5, and it gets my full endorsement to use for filming long outdoor events like wedding ceremonies in the middle of the summer. I will link to my full review of the FX5 if you were thinking about buying this camera down in the video description for you to watch, and I'll also link to my memory card buyer's guide for this camera, because did you know that if you want to film in RAW with the FX5, you don't necessarily have to buy CFexpress cards that are really expensive. You can actually use SD cards that you may already own. Yes, my video breaks it all down for you and tells you the exact cards to buy for different formats, and I even give you a downloadable cheat sheet that's super easy to follow, and it's all linked down in the video description for free. Please like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you want to see more videos about the FX5, because I have a lot more coming. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.